OK, the Chancellor is putting the final touches to his spring statement on the state of the nation's economy. Rishi Sunak is due to unveil his plans in the House of Commons on Wednesday.
So what can we expect? Let's talk to Albie Amankona, political commentator. Good morning. It's good to see you today.
Good morning.
What do we think? Because there's some indications in the paper that Mr Sunak is saying, look, you know, I want to make sure the rest of this government's term is about tax cutting and is about having more money in your pocket. Are we going to actually hear anything to push us in that direction?
I think it's difficult to say until the spring statement comes out later on this week. I think Rishi Sunak is certainly keen to push a narrative that this government wants to lower taxes in the long term, because of course we've got the national insurance contributions rises happening. We've had rises to corporation tax and things like that, sort of maybe unconservative measures. So he's certainly keen to push a message that the goal of this government is to lower taxes in the long term, but I'm unsure whether or not we'll see that in the spring statement.
So it's all about messaging rather than action at the minute.
Yes, because really, at the moment, that's probably all the Chancellor can do. Obviously, we've got the situation in Ukraine, which is going on, the cost of living crisis. We're coming off the back of the pandemic, where we've seen huge increase in government spending. And the Chancellor wants to send signals that perhaps the state won't be as interventionist in all crises that come.
I'm not saying this. I'm going to try and phrase this carefully, Albie, because is it possible that some of the financial situation that we're in now is the war is allowing a little smokescreen to cover up perhaps mistakes which might have been made in the last 2 to 3 years? That's not to say that the war is a good excuse. Everybody would agree it's a terrible turn of events. But does something like this act as a little sort of help to governments in this situation if they've got financial mistakes to hide?
I don't know that it necessarily helps with financial mistakes, but certainly with other issues like Partygate, no one is talking about Partygate anymore. So I would agree with you when it comes to maybe smaller issues like Partygate, but on the financial situation, you know, it's absolutely right to say that the country's public finances are in a difficult position with inflation rising. We spent in December 2021 about £8.1 billion on servicing our debt interest. In December 2020, that figure was £5.4 billion. If you extrapolate £8.1 billion across 12 months, that's almost £100 billion just on servicing debt. That is almost as much as we spend on education, more than we spend on defence, and just over half of the NHS budget just on interest payments.
I mean, the Chancellor is stuck between a rock and a hard place, isn't he? Because as Oliver Dowden pointed out on yesterday, or was it Wednesday? Can't remember. On Friday, can't remember. But saying, you know, we're starting now a 2-year campaign for the next general election. A general election where we know the government is in a tougher position than it was. Now, when it comes particularly to levelling up, when it comes to red wall seats and all the rest of it, that's going to involve spending a bit of money, isn't it?
Yes, absolutely. We are starting the beginning of an election campaign. That election might come in 2023, so next year, or 2024, and it will probably mean that we do have to spend some more money in northern seats who lent us their vote in 2019 because they believed Boris Johnson when he said that he wanted to level up and spread opportunity across the United Kingdom. But part of spending public money, taxpayers' money, investing it in the UK economy, is about making the economy grow. So it's not just about spending money to spend on public services, it's about growing the economy so that we can lower taxes and spend more money on the services that we all enjoy.
We've been thinking the election will be 2024. I was quite surprised to hear the rumour today that it might be called for 2023. What factors would influence that decision by the Conservatives?
I think the main factors that would influence the decision on when the election will be is polling. We are still in a period where the Conservatives have been behind in the polls now since sort of last autumn when the Patterson scandal kicked off, and then Partygate really accelerated that polling fall. But what we've seen during the Ukraine war, and this is a common feature when it comes to conflicts, is it tends to give the incumbents a boost. And whilst we're still behind Labour in the polls, I think we're at 35 and Labour is at 39, we are starting to see an upward trajectory. So it would mostly be on polling and how far we are along in sort of implementing the policies of the Level Up agenda.
Where are we in terms of Fixed Term Parliament Act now? Is that gone entirely?
I think the Fixed Term Parliament Act has gone. So before we had the fixed term, or it's in the process.
Yes, I was going to say.
Before we had the Fixed Term Parliaments Act, where I think we had to have elections every 5 years as a result of the coalition. And now, obviously, we're no longer in a coalition. We've got a huge majority Conservative government, so that piece of legislation some might argue is no longer necessary.
Yeah, I was going to say, because if it's based purely on polling under a fixed-term Parliament Act, you'd need the Labour Party, you'd need the Commons to approve it, wouldn't you? Which I guess would seem pretty unlikely.
Yes, it would seem unlikely. And of course, when we had the general election called in 2019, it was because the House of Commons approved it.
Spring conference yesterday, Boris Johnson's speech. How do you feel as a Conservative about the way it's been reported on the front pages of the papers today?
The way that it's been reported on the front page of the papers today focused on this comment about the comment he made about Brexit and comparing it to the Ukraine war, and that people voted for Brexit, not because they were anti-foreigner, but because they were pro-freedom, which I think is a fine message, but it's obviously caused controversy with all the expected people, you know, people in the European Union, left-wing media outlets and so on and so forth. But I expect the media to sort of make that kind of reporting, but really when we think of the substance of the speech, when he was talking about the fact that he thought that Russia had invaded Ukraine not because there's a real threat of Zelensky sort of hurting the Russian people that live in Ukraine, more about how Putin is actually concerned that there might be some sort of overthrow in Russia if Ukraine is seen to be successful. I think that's probably the most important thing that we can take from this.
But what's worrying from this, and as Petri, our paper reviewer, was saying earlier on, it's like, read the room, Boris. It's just, surely someone, whoever wrote that, because he won't have written it, a speechwriter's written that, and he's gone and approved it, but you'd look at that, wouldn't you, and go, this isn't the right tone. This isn't the right tone. You could have spotted a mile off what the papers were going to pick up on that. That's the takeaway headline.
You see, it's interesting when you say read the room, because that speech was for the Spring Conservative Party conference in Blackpool. Not necessarily the whole country, and certainly not the European Union. The whole point of Spring Conference, especially now, is about rallying activists, rallying support behind the Prime Minister, so that people can go out on the doorsteps in May when the local elections are coming up, and we're going to hopefully win some more councillor seats. I think that's unlikely. So that comment, people at conference broadly will have been very happy with, and it's about that room there, not necessarily the broader room of the United Kingdom and the rest of the world.
That's interesting. That's interesting.
Albie Amankona. We are out of time, but it is good to talk to you. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you. Good to see you.
Thank you.